recognized symbol of excellence for your entertainment.
Blondie, one of the biggest and most iconic rock bands in history. Like many icons, they are set to receive the Hollywood biopic treatment. On this episode of Machino Music, your host Brett Strong will attempt to cast this potential movie. Who will play Chris Stein, Jimmy Destri, Nigel Harrison, Frank Infante, Clem Burke, and of course, Debbie Harry. Find out next on Machino Music.
Welcome to Machino Music, the show that puts the music in Machino music, with your host, me, Brett Strong. Today on Machino Music, I'm going to be casting the Blondie biopic. That's right, a movie is being developed based on the band Blondie. So I thought, why don't I try and cast this sucker? Okay, casting the Blondie biopic, interesting topic here. Of course, as you know, if you've watched this program, Blondie is one of my all-time favorite bands. Done a few Blondie shows. And there has been a movie announced that, kind of sort of in development, probably going to have a development hell, based off of Debbie Harry's autobiography, Face It. And it sounds kind of cool. A Hollywood biopic, or biopic, as some people say. We just sound stupid. Don't say it like that. But yeah, a biopic about Blondie. Now, Hollywood biopics can kind of be a little all over the place. Kind of get a little screwy with the timeline, changing things, kind of putting stuff in the wrong order chronologically. Like, oh, I didn't know Queen did We Will Rock You in 1980. Oh, that's interesting. But yeah, doing stuff like that. Bohemian Rhapsody was a great movie, but some of the timeline stuff and just always like, why? But there's there's been so many, like Bohemian Rhapsody, of course. There's The Dirt, the Motley Crue one. There was Rocket Man on Elton John. Those are kind of the more recent ones. There have been so many others. And Blondie is getting one. And I thought, hey, I've made movies. I've done, independent films. And I've had to do casting. I've had to cast actors and stuff, had to find the right people. So I thought, what the hell? I'll try and cast this Blondie biopic. Now, I want to say, I'm not going off of, real, facial matches. Maybe kind of, sort of, but more we're going like a vibe, an energy. Because sometimes you gotta kind of go with that. Just go with a vibe, a feel. I sound like such a snob, but that's what you gotta do sometimes. So I'm not trying to go for exact facial matches. Just kind of just see who I think might work. As if I'm making this movie. But if it was in production, that was a big spit I just did right there. If it was in production, and I had to make the decisions, this is who I would want to take a look at. Now also, I'm going to forget about Gary Valentine. He kind of wasn't in the band for very long. And, we're kind of screwed with the timeline here. So let's have Frank Infante and Nigel Harrison as original members of the band. Frank Infante didn't actually come on till 1978. He didn't officially join, but he did play on Plastic Letters, 1977, first album 1976. So he was kind of, sort of around when the band was still sort of just before their big breakthrough. So let's just say that. He was in the band. Frank Infante was in the band from the start. Gary Valentine, he could be in maybe just okay, here he's replaced, and then you barely talk about him. So I'm not casting Gary Valentine, let's just say that. But let's get right into the casting here. Starting with Jimmy Destri. Now, who should play Jimmy Destri? been watching a lot of the show Yellow Jackets recently. I mean, everybody's talking about the show. It's a sensation. Great show. Engrossing. And, I mean, it's a spicy meatball every episode. Can't stop thinking, just keep burping it up. It won't stay down. I can't digest this show. It's just so crazy. But I've had a lot of these actors on my brain, so why not for Jimmy Destry? Let's have Kevin Alves. I mean, he might look a little too ethnic, but he got kind of the right look. I mean, you know, makeup and hair can go a long way. So, you know, he might, he could work. And he's a good actor. And you don't want to get too many, like, big names, as you'll see through this. You don't want to get too many, like, really big names, because these are, like, iconic people. You kind of want to get, you don't want to, because then you'll be looking like, oh, that's, whomever, like some big name star. Oh, that's Brad Pitt. They always say Brad Pitt. I want Brad Pitt to play me. No, Brad Pitt's not going to play you. And he shouldn't. But yeah, Kevin Alves as Jimmy Destry. Next, Frank Infante. As we said before, he is going to be, in this timeline, he's already in the band. So for Frank Infante, I'm thinking, what about Joe Jonas? Now, I'm not a Jonas Brothers fan, but I, appreciate they're talented. But, I mean, they can play instruments, which I think is a plus. And Joe Jonas has been, well, all Jonas Brothers, but Joe Jonas has been going into acting. And he does a lot of supporting roles, and Frank Infante would be kind of more of a supporting role, and but it's still an important part of the story. I think he has the right feel for it, and he can play the guitar. And, the guitar is something you can fake a little easier than other instruments, and we'll get into that. But, it's good to, somebody just know what they're doing. So don't have to fake too much. It looks like, oh, that guy can really play. So I think he has the right vibe. A bit better looking than, actually a lot better looking than Frank Infante. But, again, we're not going for, facial matches here. But I think he could work. Joe Jonas, Frank Infante. Now, what about Nigel Harrison? One of the better looking members of the band. He had big, curly hair. Interesting looking guy. And I'm just who are these, sort of young, curly haired actors? Thinking, what about Finn Wolfhard? Best known for Stranger Things. He's also getting into feature films. He was in Ghostbusters Afterlife. And it could be a good role for him. He's still kind of on his way up. He could work. Finn Wolfhard for Nigel Harrison. Alright, now we get into the three main players of the band. The three constants. The three main members. You see pictures of Blondie. There's a t-shirt that just has these three on it. Clem Burke, Chris Stein, and of course, Debbie Harry. But who we cast for Clem Burke? I'm thinking Miles Teller. Give him the Clem Burke hairstyle there, almost that kind of Mo Howard hair. He might look like a good Clem Burke. And also, I've seen the movie Whiplash. Sensational movie, great. He can play the drums. I mean, they did use a double for some of the close-ups, but he had to learn how to play the drums. And the drums, as I was saying, with the faking instruments, the drums are difficult to fake. Because you really got to hit them. Even if you don't use the actual soundtrack of the actual drums, right there live, and you do overdubs, it's still good to look like you know what you're doing. Especially with, the drums. And also, Clem Burke is just such a, arms all over the place, kind of a real basher. So it'd be good to have an actor who just, kind of know their way around a drum set. And Miles Teller can do that, and also he is a great actor. So, I'm saying Miles Teller for Clem Burke. Next, Chris Stein. Now, Chris Stein, You need someone, I think, who has who has a sense of humor, can be funny. Chris Stein's like a funny guy, dry sense of humor. And I'm thinking somebody like Fred Armisen. I mean, here's a guy, like Fred Armisen's like, real kind of chameleon comedian. I mean, he does impressions, he does characters, is, Saturday Night Live cast member. And he's just really talented guy. And he can look young, he can look old. I mean, he's just a really brilliant guy. So I think he'd make a great Chris Stein. When I look at him, he's like, yeah, he could be that, kind of laid back, fun, just like that dry sense of humor, cool guy. And also, he is a big fan of punk and new wave music. Like, that's his whole scene. He's really into it. There's a clip of him on Jimmy Fallon playing different guitar styles from punk music. Like, goes to the history of punk guitar styles. It's really cool, really funny. But it really shows that he's just so into this scene. Now we get Debbie Harry. The Queen, Debbie Harry. So beautiful, so cool, just so awesome. Yeah, just who do you get? It's based on her book. Now, Debbie Harry herself has been asked who would play her. She's mentioned Miley Cyrus. Miley Cyrus could work, but maybe she's, I think, too famous. And also her voice, she's got that, I mean, she's a great performer, fantastic performer. But she has that really kind of raspy voice. Debbie had more of a melodic voice. More of an angelic voice. Miley might be a little too hard. And also looks-wise, I don't know. Another actress that's been brought up possibly as a contender to play Debbie, Margot Robbie has been brought up. I mean, she's a great actress, but again, I think she's too famous. She's way too famous. And I mean, you're gonna get a great performance. I mean, she could pull it off because she's awesome. Currently playing Barbie, so Margot Robbie is beautiful and just very talented. She could do it, but again, too famous. You want to go kind of more with an unknown, somebody who can maybe use that little bit of a jump if they want to get into movies. And hear me out here. I'm thinking former WWE superstar, now currently adult content creator, Mandy Rose. Amanda Sacamano, I think she could do it. I mean, after her exit or release from WWE, she did an interview where it's kind of like, well, what's next for you? I mean, explain for me, showing your butthole on the internet. She said she's trying to get into movies. And just a really high-profile role. And I'm watching in this interview, and I'm thinking, that's Debbie Harry. That's Debbie Harry. She's got that kind of laid-back, cool kind of and she's from New York, so she's into that scene. So she knows, it's just, I was watching this going, that is Debbie. And, I mean, and Mandy Rose, as a wrestler, she didn't come from wrestling or even being a fan of wrestling, so she, but just had to learn it. But she got so good so fast and really had a knack for it. And she's got charisma out the wazoo, and it's a nice wazoo. But she could do it. She's just the kind of person that would just put her everything into making the role work. And she just has the right vibe. And that's what you kind of got to go for when you're casting, especially famous people. So yeah, I mean, just Debbie Harry, played by Mandy Rose Amanda Sacamano. Yeah, and if you want to get into acting, that's a good jump. I think it would totally work. So that's how I would cast the movie. Now another character in the movie would have to be, so just do a little quick thing, talk a little bit about this. Another sort of cast member would be New York City itself. And this is the 70s New York. So I would want, like, my vision for this movie, if I was directing this thing, I would want, like, Taxi Driver New York. Just that dark, gritty 70s, just dirty New York City. Like Taxi Driver New York, but you could also have a little bit of that glitzy, like Saturday Night Fever New York. But you want to show the danger of New York, so I would have more of like Taxi Driver New York. That's what I want for that. That would look really cool. They just really capture that scene. That punk rock, do-it-yourself, dirty, gritty scene. It would look really cool. So that's how I would sort of we put it together if I was directing it. And if anybody from the Blondie camp who is making this movie happens to see this, let's do lunch. Babe, let's make this happen. That's it for this week. Until we meet again, this is Brett Strong saying good journey.